Have you ever wondered if the Norns weave fate with threads of forbidden passion, dooming entire clans to ruin? In the storm-ravaged North Sea, a Viking berserker named Eirikos unearthed ancient runes on a shattered shield, prophesying a love that would ignite war between Norse gods and shatter oaths of honor. But when he fell for Mira, a shield maiden from a rival Greek-infused clan, Odin's ravens circled with warnings, and Freya's whispers fueled a divine wager that pitted loyalty against desire. As their secret bond grew, betrayal ripped through. Their war bands summoning krakens and spectral warriors to enforce the gods' merciless will. Was their love a curse from the All-Father himself, or the spark to rewrite Viking sagas forever? Before we sail deeper into this saga, take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. The Norse world is full of forgotten stories, and this is just one carved in the runestone of time. If you crave epic Viking sagas, mysterious discoveries from the fjords, and the stories the skalds dared not tell, stay with us, because this tale will pull you into the mists of Midgard itself. The midnight sea boiled with the fury of warring gods as the Skolder's fury, her dragon-carved prow, slick with salt spray, and divine wrath plunged through. Mountainous waves beneath a sky torn between Zeus's lightning and Thor's thunder. Upon her blood-slicked deck, where Or brothers fought for their very souls against the storm's fury, Eirikos Drustan locked his twin-axis storm-cleaver and Aegisfang against the glowing blade Gorgona, wielded by Mira Lysandra with all the deadly grace of Athena's blessing. Their eyes burned with a love that could drown worlds, yet their clans had sworn blood oaths of eternal enmity. He the berserker son of the northern reaches, she the shield maiden daughter of rival chieftains, whose very names were curses upon each other's lips. The storm that battered them was no natural tempest, but the collision of divine will, as Odin's ravens screamed warnings through howling winds, while Poseidon's trident stirred the depths to madness. And beneath the churning waters, the world serpent Jarmungandr writhed in unholy alliance with sea gods who should have been enemies. As another wave, tall as the mast itself, crashed over the struggling longship, both warriors felt the ship's oak planks groan and split beneath their feet. Yet neither could yield, not when their forbidden love blazed brighter than the lightning above, not when every breath might be their last, not when the kraken's shadow began rising from the black depths below them like a mountain of tentacles and ancient hatred, its call echoing through the storm-torn night. Choose, blood of mortals, love or clan, betrayal or death, for the gods have grown weary of your endless wars, and would see this matter settled once and forever in blood and brine. And as the great beast's tentacles broke the surface, each one thick as the ship's mast and glistening with the phosphor glow of deep magic, Eirikos and Mira found themselves thrown together against the kraken's first crushing embrace. There, weapons forgotten, as they clung to each other with desperate strength, knowing that whatever came next would either forge them into legend or drag them both into the hungry darkness of the god-haunted deep. Dawn broke bloody over the wreckage-strewn waters, where the Skolder's fury had died in the kraken's embrace, and the survivors who crawled gasping onto the black sand beaches of the Isles of Scotia felt the strange warmth of cursed ground beneath their salt-crusted hands, while above them wheeled ravens that spoke in human tongues and seabirds, whose cries carried the weight of ancient prophecies. Eirikos dragged himself from the foam-flecked shallows with Mira's unconscious form clutched against his chest, her dark hair streaming with seawater and her blade Gorgona still glowing faintly with divine fire. though whether from Athena's blessing, or some darker magic of this haunted place, none could say. Behind them stumbled the remnants of the war-band Astaroth Vidderson, the skald, his silver tongue, now thick with salt and fear, as Hecate's mark burned fresh upon his brow, like a brand of midnight shadows. Sigrun Callista, the seer archer, her wolf-gray eyes wide with visions of blood and betrayal, as Artemis whispered hunting songs in her mind, and a handful of others, whose names would be remembered in the dark days to come. The island itself seemed to pulse with malevolent life, its twisted trees bearing fruit that looked like severed heads, its stones weeping crimson tears that steamed when they touched the sand, its very air thick with the weight of divine warfare that had raged here since the world was young. "She brings doom upon us all," growled Thorvald Ironarm, spitting blood and seawater as he glared at Mira's still form. For the Kraken came when she raised her cursed blade, and now we are marooned in this god-haunted waste because of her clan's treachery. But Eirikos rose like a storm wind given flesh, his twin axes singing their hunger for blood as he faced down his shield brothers, his voice carrying the rage of berserkers, and the desperate love of a man who had found his heart's desire in the arms of his sworn enemy. "Speak one more word against her, and I'll feed your entrails to the ravens. She fought beside us when she could have let the Kraken take us all, and any man who questions her courage can test his own against my steel." As the survivors glared at each other, with hands drifting toward weapon hilts, Astaroth stumbled forward, his eyes reflecting the unholy light that now seemed to emanate from the very stones beneath their feet, and spoke the words that would haunt them through all the trials to come. "I found this carved into the rocks above the tide line. Only the blood of lovers can break the curse. And now I fear we are caught in a web spun by gods and fates far beyond our understanding, trapped on these cursed shores until we pay whatever price the old powers demand." The spectral warriors surged from the petrified forest, their forms shimmering with the wrath of gods long dead. The Isles of Scotia groaned beneath their advance, the ground splitting to reveal rivers of blood that steamed in the chill dawn. Eirikos Drustan roared, Stormcleaver and Aegisfang flashing as he met the first specter, its bronze spear clanging against his axis. Mira Lysandra fought at his side, Gorgona, a streak of divine light, carving through ghostly armor as if it were mist. Their war band, battered but unyielding, formed a shield wall, their blades singing a saga of defiance against the cursed isles. Astaroth Vidderson wove through the chaos, his dagger a subtle fang where axes were too blunt, his lips muttering charms to ward off the specter's chill. Sigrun Callista loosed arrows from her scavenged bow, each shot guided by Freya's grace, piercing the hollow eyes of their foes. Yet the specters were endless, their forms reborn from the island's cursed soil, and the air thrummed with the gods' laughter. High above, Odin's ravens circled, their cries clashing with the screech of Hera's peacocks, as if the heavens themselves wagered on the mortal's blood. In a moment's respite, Eirikos and Mira fell back, their breaths mingling in the cold. "This land is their battlefield," Mira whispered, her hand brushing his, a fleeting anchor in the storm. "Norse and Greek gods, using us as pawns." Eirikos' eyes hardened, his father's unavenged death a shadow on his soul. Yet her touch stirred a fire that no oath could quench. "Then we'll carve our own fate," he growled, his voice a vow. Sigrun, watching from afar, clenched her fists, her heart aching with unspoken love for Mira, her visions whispering of a world in flames if the lovers' bond endured. The sky darkened, and a voice like thunder rolled across the isles, not one god, but two, Odin and Hera, their words a binding pact. "Let the mortals prove their worth," Odin intoned, his spear flashing in the clouds. "If love prevails, we withdraw. If duty holds, the war endures," Hera countered, her eyes gleaming with cunning. The warband froze, their weapons heavy with the weight of divine scrutiny. Astaroth's gaze flickered to the runestone's warning, Hecate's whisper urging him to turn the wager to her advantage. The specters retreated, melting into the petrified trees, but the respite was a trap. The forest itself shifted, branches snapping like bones, revealing paths that led to caverns pulsing with unnatural light. "The gods test us," Sigrun murmured, her seer's eyes clouded with visions of Eirikos and Mira standing over a shattered world. The warband pressed forward, their steps heavy with dread, the isle's curse tightening like a noose. Astaroth lingered at the rear, his fingers tracing the runestone's words, his heart torn between brotherhood and Hecate's promise. A horn's blast shattered the silence, raw and fierce, echoing from the cliffs. The warband turned, weapons raised as a fleet of longships crested the horizon, their sails blood-red under the cursed sky. At their head stood Leif Nicandros, Mira's betrothed, his sword blazing with Ares fire, his eyes locked on her with a mix of love and vengeance. "Mira Lysandra," he bellowed, his voice carrying over the waves. "Return to your clan, or see this traitor's blood stain the shore." The warband tensed, Eirikos stepping before Mira, his axes ready, as the gods' wager took flesh in the rival chieftain's challenge. The blood-red sails of Leif Nicandros' fleet loomed closer, their oars churning the cursed waters of Scotia's shores. The warband stood resolute on the rocky beach, their shield wall a defiant line against the petrified forest's ominous glow. Eirikos Drustan gripped Stormcleaver and Aegisfang, his berserker's heart pounding as he faced the rival chieftain's longships. Mira Lysandra stood beside him, Gorgona gleaming with Athena's light, her stance unwavering despite the weight of Lev's gaze, her betrothed, her clan's champion, now her enemy. The air crackled with the gods' anticipation, Odin's ravens and Hera's peacocks circling above like vultures over a battlefield. Leif leapt from his ship, his boots crunching on the shale, his sword blazing with Ares' wrath. "Mira Lysandra," he roared again, his voice a thunderclap that shook the cliffs. "You shame your kin, standing with this oathbreaker." His eyes, once soft with love, now burned with betrayal, yet a flicker of pain lingered, as if he sought to reclaim her heart as much as her loyalty. The warband bristled, their weapons drawn, but Eirikos raised a hand, silencing them. "This is her choice," he said, his voice low but iron-hard, meeting Mira's gaze. Her nod was slight, but it carried the weight of a saga unspoken. Astaroth Vidarson lingered at the edge of the group, his dagger hidden, his mind a storm of Hecate's whispers. "Lead them to ruin," she urged, her voice coiling like smoke. His loyalty to Eirikos, his shield brother, clashed with the Skald's hunger for vengeance against those who slaughtered his kin. Sigrun Callista, her seer's eyes darting between Mira and Leif, felt a vision stir blood staining the sand, the lovers' fates entwined with the gods' wager. She gripped her bow, her heart torn by her unspoken love for Mira, knowing each step drew them closer to doom. The gods' presence pressed heavier, their avatars shimmering in the sky. Ares' war cry fueled Leif's blade, while Freya's breath seemed to linger in Mira's defiant stance. "Return to me," Leif said, his voice softening, almost pleading. "Your clan needs you. I need you." Mira's hand tightened on Gorgona, her eyes flickering to Eirikos, whose silence spoke louder than any oath. "My place is here," she said, her words cutting sharper than her blade. Leif's face darkened, and he raised his sword, the air igniting with divine fire. "Then your lover dies." The war band tensed, but the gods' voices boomed, freezing all in place. A duel. Odin and Hera declared, their wager taking form. Let blood decide their worth. The beach shuddered, ancient standing stones. Rising from the sand, their surfaces carved with runes and Greek sigils, pulsing with the god's will. Leif stepped forward, his blade a beacon of Ares' fury. Eirikos met his gaze, his axes gleaming, Odin's whisper urging him to strike true. Mira stood between them, her heart a battlefield of love and duty, as the war band formed a ring around the stones. Astaroth's fingers twitched, Hecate's promise burning in his veins. He could end this now, betray Eirikos to Leif's blade, and claim his vengeance. Yet his shield brother's trust held him fast, a chain stronger than any god's curse. Sigrun's vision flared, Mira's blade raised, blood on her hands, the aisles trembling. "This duel will break us all," she whispered, unheard in the wind's howl. As Leif and Eirikos circled, their weapons poised, Mira's voice cut through the tension. "Enough. I will not let you die for me." Her words shook the stones, and the ground split beneath them, a chasm yawning wide, swallowing the combatants into the dark heart of Scotia. The earth swallowed Eirikos Drustan and Leif Nicandros, the chasm's jaws snapping shut as the war band scrambled back from the crumbling edge. Mira Lysandra's cry echoed, raw and desperate, as she lunged toward the abyss, Gorgona's light flickering in her trembling grip. The standing stones pulsed with a sickly glow, their runes and Greek sigils bleeding red, as if the isles themselves wept for the gods' cruel wager. Above, Odin's ravens shrieked, and Hera's peacocks flared their tails, the sky a tapestry of divine wrath. The war band stood frozen, their breaths held as the ground groaned and sealed, leaving only silence and the weight of Mira's choice. Below, in a cavern lit by veins of molten stone, Eirikos and Leif faced each other atop a circle of ancient slabs, their surfaces etched with the bones of forgotten warriors. The air thrummed with the god's presence, Odin's voice a cold, blade in Eirikos' mind, offering victory through his spear Gungnir's shadow, but only if he forsook Mira. "Slay the Greek, and your father's death is avenged," the Allfather whispered. Across the arena, Hera's voice coiled around Leif, promising the restoration of his clan's honor if he brought her Eirikos' heart. Their eyes locked, not as men, but as avatars of war, their weapons heavy with divine will. Eirikos swung. Storm cleaver, its arc a howl of wind, but Leif parried with his blazing sword, Ares' fire sparking against the axe's edge. The clash echoed like thunder, each blow a verse in a saga of blood and betrayal. Leif fought with precision, his blade, a serpent striking for Eirikos' heart, while the berserker's axes danced with primal fury, carving furrows in the stone. Above, the war band peered through cracks in the earth, their shouts muffled by the cavern's weight. Astaroth Vidarson clutched his dagger, Hecate's whisper urging him to act, to tip the scales, but his loyalty to Eirikos held him back. A fraying thread. Sigrun Callista's visions surged, blood pooling. Mira weeping, the isles aflame, her love for Mira, a silent torment as she prayed to Freya for guidance. Mira, unable to stand idle, hacked at the sealed chasm with Gorgona, her blade's divine light cutting through stone. "I won't lose you both," she screamed, her voice breaking as the earth resisted. The war band joined her, their axes and spears chipping away, but the god's will was iron. In the arena below, Leif's blade grazed Eirikos' shoulder, drawing blood that hissed on the slabs. Eirikos roared, each fang slamming into Leif's shield, splintering it. "For Mira," Eirikos bellowed, his heart a storm of love and duty, defying Odin's command. Leif staggered, his eyes flickering with doubt, as if Mira's name stirred something deeper than Ares' fire. The stones bled faster, their crimson streams pooling at the arena's center, a mirror to the god's wager. Mira's blade broke through, a shaft of light piercing the cavern. She leapt down, landing between the combatants, Gorgona raised. "Stop!" she cried, her voice a command that shook the air. Leif froze, his sword lowered, but Eirikos' berserker rage faltered only a moment. The war band above gasped. Their loyalty split. Some cried for Mira's honor, others for Eirikos' life. Her intervention shamed her clan, her betrothed's. Face twisting with betrayal, yet her eyes held only Eirikos, a love that defied the gods. The cavern trembled, the gods' laughter a roar in their minds. "You defy us?" Odin and Hera thundered, their avatars flaring in the sky. The slabs cracked, and the ground split anew, a labyrinth of dark tunnels yawning beneath. Eirikos grabbed Mira's hand, pulling her from the edge, while Leif stumbled back, his sword still burning. The arena collapsed, swallowing the combatants. Into the isle's cursed depths, the gods' wager unresolved, their fates now bound to the labyrinth below. The labyrinth swallowed Eirikos, Mira, and Leif, its tunnels a maze of shadow and stone, carved from the bones of a Pictish fortress, now twisted by the gods' malice. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the walls pulsing with the sickly green light that cast their faces in ghostly hues. Eirikos Drustan clutched Stormcleaver and Aegisfang, his berserker's heart steady despite the darkness pressing against him. Mira Lysandra, Gorgona glowing faintly, stayed close, her breath a quiet anchor in the chaos. Leif Nicandros, separated by the collapse, called out, his voice echoing with Ares' fire, a mix of rage and desperation. Above, the war band scrambled. At the chasm's edge, their axes useless against the sealed earth. Astaroth Vidarson's eyes darted through the gloom, Hecate's voice a serpent in his mind. "Lead them to the Heartstone, Scald, and your kin's blood will be avenged." His fingers tightened on his dagger, guilt gnawing at his loyalty to Eirikos, his shield brother. Sigrun Callista, her seer's vision clouded by the labyrinth's curse, saw flashes of horror. Mira and Eirikos bound in chains of fire, the world crumbling. Her love for Mira burned, a silent vow to save her, even as Freya and Artemis whispered conflicting paths. The labyrinth's tunnels twisted, their walls etched with scenes of ancient wars, Norse longships clashing with Greek triremes, warriors falling under the gaze of gods. A low growl echoed, and from the shadows lunged a beast, its form a blasphemy of Fenrir's jaws and the Hydra's scales. Eirikos met it, his axes carving through its hide, while Mira's blade danced, severing. A snapping head. Together, she shouted, their movements a seamless saga, their love a shield against the dark. The beast fell, but more eyes gleamed in the distance, the labyrinth alive with the god's wrath. Astaroth trailing the warband as they descended. After their leaders found a chamber where the heartstone glowed, a jagged crystal pulsing with a light of forgotten oaths. Hecate appeared, her 3 faces smiling. "Take it," she hissed, "but spill blood to claim its power." Astaroth's hand hovered, his mind torn betray Eirikos, or defy a goddess. He hid the stone's location, rejoining the others, his silence a heavier burden than his dagger. Sigrun's visions grew darker, showing the heartstone shattering, the isles sinking. "We must find them," she urged, her voice breaking. The war band pressed deeper, their torches flickering against walls that seemed to whisper. Eirikos and Mira, reunited after felling another beast, paused in a chamber where the air hummed with divine presence. "This place tests us," Mira said, her hand brushing Eirikos, their bond a defiance of the god's wager. But the tunnels shifted, separating them from the warband, and a roar shook the earth leaf, driven by Ares, closing in. The labyrinth's heart pulsed louder, the heartstone's light spilling through cracks in the stone. Astaroth, alone again, stood before it, Hecate's demand ringing, blood for power. His dagger gleamed, and he turned, hearing the warband's approach. As Eirikos and Mira fought through another tunnel, their blades singing, the walls trembled, collapsing inward. The Heartstone's chamber loomed ahead, but the beast surged, and Leaf's war cry echoed closer, promising a reckoning. The labyrinth tightened its grip, and Astaroth's choice loomed, a betrayal that could save or doom them all. The labyrinth's collapse shook the earth, stone and shadow crashing, as Eirikos Drustan and Mira Lysandra fought their way toward the Heartstone's pulsing light. Dust choked the air, the walls of the ancient Pictish fortress groaning as if the isles themselves sought to bury them. Eirikos' axes, Stormcleaver and Aegisfang, sang through the dark, cutting down another beast, a monstrous blend of Fenrir's claws and Hydra's venomous heads. Mira's blade, Gorgona, glowed with Athena's blessing, her strikes precise as she guarded Eirikos' flank. Their breaths synchronized, their bond of fire that burned brighter than the labyrinth's curse. Above, the warband clawed through rubble, their torches flickering in the stifling tunnels. Sigrun Callista led them, her seer's eyes haunted by visions of a shattered heartstone and a world drowned in flame. Her love for Mira, a secret heavier than her bow, drove her forward, though Freya's whispers warned of sacrifice. Astaroth Vidderson trailed behind. The Heartstone's location burned into his mind. Hecate's voice a relentless drum. Spill blood, scald, and claim your vengeance. His dagger felt heavy, each step a battle between loyalty and the promise of justice for his murdered kin. In a cavern vast as a chieftain's hall, Eirikos and Mira found the Heartstone, a jagged crystal the size of a shield, its surface swirling with the colors of a dying star. It pulsed, warping the air, bending light into visions of forgotten wars and broken oaths. Mira's hand trembled as she reached for it, her voice soft but resolute. "This could end the gods' war," she said, her eyes meeting Eirikos, "or destroy us." He nodded, his heart torn between love and his vow to avenge his father. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he swore, their hands brushing a vow stronger than steel. The cavern shuddered, and the gods' voices broke through. Odin's growl filled Eirikos' mind. "Take the stone, forsaker, and your father's killer kneels." Hera's whisper coiled around Mira. "Betray him, and your clan is saved." Their eyes locked, love warring with duty. But before they could act, Leif Nicandros burst into the chamber, his sword blazing with Ares fire. "Myra!" he roared, his voice raw with betrayal. "You'd choose this oathbreaker over your kin?" His blade pointed at Eirikos, but his eyes pleaded. With her, a lover's heart beneath a warrior's wrath. Sigrun and the warband arrived, their weapons drawn, but Sigrun's cry halted them. "The stone!" She gasped, her vision showing its power unleashed a storm to end worlds. Astaroth lingered at the cavern's edge, Hecate's laughter echoing. As he gripped his dagger, the heartstone pulsed faster. Reality-fraying shadows danced as if alive, whispering of ancient betrayals. Mira stepped toward Leif. Gorgona lowered, her voice breaking. "I love him, Leif. I cannot return." The words struck like a blade, and Leif's face twisted, Ares' fury surging. The ground cracked, the heartstone's light flaring as beasts roared from the tunnels. Eirikos and Mira fought back to back, their blades a whirlwind, while Leif charged, his sword aimed at Eirikos' heart. Sigrun loosed an arrow, grazing Leif to slow him, her love for Mira guiding her aim. Astaroth hesitated, Hecate's command burning, but the cavern's walls buckled, stone raining down. The heartstone's pulse became a scream, and the labyrinth collapsed, forcing a desperate scramble for escape. As they fled, the stone's light seared their eyes, and Sigrun's vision showed a truth too late. Mira and Eirikos, bound by love, would shatter the world. The labyrinth's collapse spat the warband into a valley of petrified warriors, their stone faces frozen in screams from battles lost to time. The Isles of Scotia loomed, their cursed air heavy with the scent of blood and ash. Eirikos, Drustan, and Mira Lysandra stumbled from the rubble, their hands still clasped, Stormcleaver and Gorgonaslick, with the ichor of slain beasts. The heartstone's light had dimmed, but its pulse lingered in their bones, a reminder of the gods' wager, and the doom it promised. Above the sky churned, Odin's ravens and Hera's peacocks, circling as if mocking their escape. Astaroth Vidurson emerged last, his eyes haunted, Hecate's voice a relentless echo. "Lead them to ruin scald, and your kin's vengeance is yours." The heartstone's location burned in his mind, but so did Eirikos' trust, a chain he could not break. Sigrun Callista, her seer's gaze clouded with grief, sensed his treachery like a shadow on her soul. Her visions grew sharper. Mira's blood on the sand, the isles sinking, the gods' laughter. Her love for Mira, a silent wound, drove her to scan the valley, her bow ready, though her heart trembled. The petrified warriors whispered, their voices a chorus of ancient betrayals, revealing the gods' true motives, not victory, but chaos. Their wager a game to sat their boredom. Eirikos and Mira stood at the valley's heart, their breath steadying as they surveyed the warband, fewer now, their faces etched with loss. "We cannot stay here," Eirikos said, his voice low, his axes gleaming in the dim light. Mira nodded, her hand brushing his, their love a defiant flame against the gods' will. "The heartstone calls us," she said, her eyes fierce. "We end this, or it ends us." Astaroth's guilt gnawed deeper, his fingers twitching toward his dagger. Hecate's promise was a siren's call, but Eirikos' brotherhood was an anchor. He opened his mouth to confess, to warn them, when a horn blared, sharp and brutal. From the valley's edge, Leif Nicandro's warband charged, their red sails now banners on the shore, their blades gleaming with Ares' fire. Leif strode at their head, his sword raised, his eyes locked on Mira. "You cannot run from your clan," he roared, his voice breaking with betrayal. The war band braced, but Astaroth froze, Hecate's command searing, "Deliver them to him." The valley erupted in chaos, steel clashing as Leif's warriors struck. Eirikos and Mira fought as one, their blades a dance of defiance, felling foes with supernatural grace. Sigrun's arrows flew, each shot a prayer to Freya, but her visions screamed of betrayal. Astaroth slipped through the fray, his dagger drawn, and in a moment of weakness, he whispered to one of Leif's men, revealing the warband's sanctuary, a hidden cove where they'd planned to regroup. The warrior nodded, vanishing into the melee, and Astaroth's heart sank, Hecate's laughter ringing in his ears. Leif's warband pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming. Mira's blade faltered as Leif closed in, his sword a blazing arc. "Come back to me," he pleaded, even as he struck. Eirikos parried a blow meant for her, his roar shaking the valley. The petrified warriors' whispers grew louder, their stone eyes gleaming as the ground trembled. Sigrun, sensing Astaroth's treachery, spun toward him, her bow raised. But it was too late. Leif's men surged, ropes and blades flashing, and Mira was seized, dragged toward their ships as Eirikos' bellow of rage echoed through the cursed valley. Mira Lysandra's wrists burned beneath the ropes as Leif Nicandro's warriors dragged her toward the blood-red sails of their longships, anchored off the Isle of Broken Oaths. The valley of petrified warriors lay in chaos, its stone sentinels trembling as if stirred by the clash of steel and screams. Eirikos Drustan roared, his axes Stormcleaver and Aegisfang, carving through foes with berserker fury, his eyes fixed on Mira's retreating form. The war band rallied behind him, there, shield wall battered but unbroken, though Astaroth Bedarsin's betrayal hung like a shadow over their ranks. Sigrun Callista, her seer's heart breaking, loosed arrows with deadly precision, her love for Mira fueling each shot, though her visions screamed of a world aflame. The Isle of Broken Oaths, its cliffs scarred by ancient Viking treaties now, shattered, pulsed with the gods' wrath. Above, the sky roared, Odin's ravens and Hera's peacocks, weaving through clouds lit by divine fire. From the east, a new force emerged, Jarl Brynjar Theon, Mira's father, wielding a hammer forged by Hephaestus, its head glowing with molten light. From the west came Freydi Smelantha, Eirikos' mother, her spear blazing with Freya's wrath. The clans collided, brother slaying brother, kin turning on kin, the valley a crucible of blood and betrayal. Eirikos fought toward Mira, his axes a whirlwind, but Leif barred his path, his sword burning with Ares' fire. "She is mine," Leif bellowed, his blade clashing against Stormcleaver, sparks raining like stars. Eirikos' eyes burned, his vow to avenge his father warring with his love for Mira. She chooses her fate. He roared, Aegisfang striking Leif's shoulder, drawing blood. Mira, struggling against her captors, drove Gorgona into a warrior's side, her voice a defiant cry. "I choose him." Her father, Brynjar, turned, his hammer raised, his face a mask of fury. "You shame us all," he thundered, his blow shaking the earth. Astroth, guilt clawing his soul, wove through the chaos, Hecate's laughter a lash against his mind. His betrayal had led Leif's men to the cove, but the sight of Mira bound and Eirikos bleeding tore at his heart. He drew his dagger, hesitating. As Sigrun's arrow grazed his arm, her eyes blazing with accusation, "Traitor!" she hissed, her vision revealing his sin. Astaroth flinched, but the gods' avatars descended in the sky, Odin's spear clashing with Hera's scepter. Their battle mirrored in the mortal fray below. The petrified warriors cracked, their stone forms splintering as the heartstones. Pulse echoed from the labyrinth's ruins. Sigrun, fighting through the melee, reached Mira, cutting her bonds. "Stay with me," Sigrun whispered, her voice breaking with love she could not voice. Mira clasped her hand, gratitude in her eyes, but her gaze sought Eirikos. The clan's assault intensified, Brynjar's hammer and Freyti's spear turning the valley into a slaughter ground. The gods' laughter grew, their wager feeding on. The chaos. Sigrun staggered, an enemy spear piercing her side, blood soaking her tunic. She fell to her knees, her vision flaring, the heartstone shattered, the aisles sinking, Mira and Eirikos lost in flame. "No," she gasped, her hand clutching Mira's. Eirikos roared, cutting through to them, his axes a shield against the tide. Leif pursued, his sword relentless, but the ground quaked, the valley splitting. Sigrun's eyes met Mira's, her final vision a warning. "Your love will end the world." As her lifeblood spilled, the sky erupted in a storm, the gods' wrath unleashed, and the Isle of Broken Oaths began to crumble beneath their feet. The Isle of Broken Oaths shuddered, its cliffs splintering as the storm unleashed by Sigrun's blood roared across the valley. Sigrun Callista lay crumpled, her lifeblood pooling on the cracked earth, her seer's eyes dimming, but fixed on Lysandra. The war band faltered, their shield wall broken, as Eirikos Drustan knelt beside her, his axes falling silent. Mira clutched Sigrun's hand, tears cutting through the grime on her face, Gorgona forgotten at her side. The gods' avatars blazed. In the sky Odin's spear clashing with Hera's scepter, while the petrified warriors' stone forms shattered, their dust swirling in the gale. Sigrun's breath rattled, her vision of a burning world fading into clarity. "Mira," she whispered, her voice a thread, "your love, it will break the curse, or us all." Her love for Mira, long unspoken, shone in her eyes, a final offering. Freya and Artemis appeared, their forms shimmering above, their voices soft yet commanding. "Offer yourself, seer," they said, "and the Heartstone's curse may break." Sigrun nodded, her blood soaking the ground, and the valley trembled, the Heartstone's pulse surging from the labyrinth's ruins below. Eirikos roared, his berserker fury rekindled, as he stood to shield Mira from Lef Nicandro's advancing war band. Leif's sword, blazing with Ares' fire, cut through the storm, his eyes torn between vengeance and love. "Mira, come back," he pleaded, but her gaze remained on Sigrun, then Eirikos, her heart a battlefield. Jarl Brynjar Theon, Mira's father, swung his Hephaestus-forged hammer, its blows shaking the earth, while Freyti's Melantha, Eirikos' mother, called down Freya's wrath, her spear a streak of divine light. The clans clashed, blood mingling. With the valley's dust, the gods wager feeding on their pain. Astaroth Vidurson, his betrayal, a weight heavier than the isles, slipped through the chaos, Hecate's laughter mocking his guilt. He had led Leif's men to their sanctuary, and now Sigrun's blood stained his soul. He drew his dagger, resolve. Hardening, he would confess, fight or die. But the ground split wider, rivers of blood boiling from the cracks, and the Heartstone's light erupted, a beacon in the storm. Sigrun's sacrifice awakened it, the crystal's pulse, a scream that warped the air, summoning a tempest that tore at the cliffs. Mira rose, Gorgona in hand, her voice a defiant cry. Enough! She stood over Sigrun, her friend's sacrifice a fire in her veins. Eirikos fought to her side, his axes carving a path through Leif's warriors. The gods' avatars descended. Closer, their clash shaking the heavens as the isle began to sink, its edges crumbling into the sea. Sigrun's eyes closed, her final breath a prayer, and the storm surged, lightning striking the valley's heart. The war band scrambled for higher ground, but the earth betrayed them, splitting beneath their feet. Leif paused, his sword lowered, his eyes on Mira, torn by her resolve. Brynjar and Freydis, locked in combat, faltered as the ground heaved. Astaroth, caught in the chaos, gripped his dagger, Hecate's voice urging betrayal, but Sigrun's sacrifice silenced her. The Heartstone's light flared, and the isle groaned, its cliffs collapsing into the roiling sea. As the survivors clung to the last shards of land, Mira and Eirikos stood together, their hands clasped, the storm a mirror to their love unyielding, but doomed to break the world. The Isle of Broken Oaths sank into the roiling sea, its cliffs crumbling like the oaths that named it, the Heartstone's blinding pulse swallowed by the waves. Eirikos, Drustan, and Mira Lysandra clung to a splintered longship, their hands locked. Stormcleaver and Gorgona lashed to their sides. The war band, battered and few, drifted on wreckage, their eyes hollow with the loss of Sigrun and the isle's collapse. Above, the storm raged, Odin's ravens and Hera's peacocks, weaving through lightning that split the sky, their wager unbroken despite the mortal's defiance. The air thrummed with the gods' fury, the sea boiling as if to claim what the isles could not. Astaroth Vidurson, adrift on a broken plank, clutched a shard of the Heartstone, its jagged edge cutting his palm. Hecate's voice, once a lash, was silent, but her mark burned on his soul, his betrayal a weight heavier than the waves. Leif Nicandros, separated but alive, gripped his sword, Ares' fire dimmed but unquenched, his heart torn between vengeance and the love he still held for Mira. The survivors washed ashore on another cursed isle, its beaches littered with the bones of ancient ships, the air thick with the whispers of fallen warriors. Eirikos and Mira staggered to their feet, their bond a flame that warmed the cold shore. Sigrun's sacrifice cannot be for nothing, Mira said, her voice steady despite her grief, Gorgona gleaming faintly in her hand. Eirikos nodded, his axes heavy with the blood of kin and foe, his vow to avenge his father, now tangled with the need to end the gods' war. We'll find the Heartstone's shards, he swore, his eyes meeting hers, a shared defiance against the heavens. The war band gathered, their faces grim, but their loyalty frayed by Astaroth's treachery, though none yet spoke it aloud. The gods' omens descended, Odin's ravens dropped a blackened feather at Eirikos' feet, a sign of his spear's promise if he forsook Mira. Hera's peacocks shed a feather that glowed at Mira's side, whispering of her clan's salvation through betrayal. The Heartstone's shards, scattered in the wreck, pulsed faintly in the sand, each fragment showing visions of alternate fates. Mira ruling her clan alone, Eirikos slaying gods, the world in flames or reborn in peace. The warband watched, awestruck, as the shards' light wove their hopes and fears into the air. Astaroth, his guilt a noose, slipped away under the pretense of scouting. The Heartstone shard in his hand flared, Hecate's voice returning. "Take it to the underworld, Skald, and your vengeance is complete." He stumbled into a cave, its walls carved with runes and Greek sigils, the air thick with the scent of awe. Death, the shard's light, opened a crack in the stone, a portal to a realm of shadow and fire. Astaroth's heart raced. Betrayal or redemption lay beyond, but his choice was his own no longer. The warband, unaware of his flight, prepared to move, their eyes on Eirikos and Mira. "We end this war," Eirikos said, his voice a Saga's cadence, rallying the broken. Mira raised Gorgona, her resolve a beacon. "For Sigrun," she added, her voice breaking. But the cave's glow caught their eyes, and a low hum shook the shore. The portal widened, shadows spilling forth, and Astaroth's absence became a wound they could not ignore. As the warband ran toward the cave, the Heartstones shards flared, and the gods' laughter echoed, their wager tightening its grip on the mortals' fates. The cursed isle trembled as the portal's shadow spilled from the cave, its glow a sickly pulse that mirrored the Heartstone's fractured light. Eirikos, Drustan, and Mira Lysandra led the warband toward the cavern, their steps heavy on the bone-strewn shore, Stormcleaver and Gorgona gleaming with resolve. The air hissed with the whispers of fallen warriors, their voices weaving tales of betrayal from ages past. Astaroth Vidarsson's absence cut like a blade, his betrayal now clear Hecate's. Mark had claimed him, and the Heartstone shard he carried threatened to unravel their saga. Above, Odin's ravens and Hera's peacocks screeched, their circling a grim omen of the gods' tightening wager. Eirikos' heart burned, his trust in his shield brother shattered, yet guilt gnawed at him. Had he failed Astaroth, driving him to Hecate's embrace? Mira's hand brushed his, her eyes fierce with shared purpose. "We find him," she said, her voice a vow, Gorgona's light cutting through the gloom. The warband followed, their numbers dwindled, their faces etched with grief for Sigrun and suspicion of each other. Leif Nicandros, trailing at the rear, gripped his sword, Ari's fire flickering, his gaze torn between Mira's defiance and his own wounded honor. The cave's mouth yawned, its walls carved with runes and Greek sigils, remnants of a Pictish ruin now alive with Hecate and Loki's malice. Traps sprang spikes of stone, flames that burned without source, each step a test of the warbands. Will Eirikos hacked through a web of spectral vines, his axes singing, while Mira's blade danced, severing shadows that lunged like beasts. The Heartstone's shard, hidden in Astaroth's grasp, pulsed somewhere ahead, its light warping the ruins into visions of betrayal brothers, slaying brothers, lovers torn apart. Astaroth stumbled through the tunnels, the shard's weight a curse in his hand. Hecate's voice was a lash. "Open the portal, Skald, and your kin's blood is avenged." The cave's heart loomed, a chamber where the air shimmered with the stench of death. He raised the shard, its light tearing a rift to the underworld, shadows coiling like serpents. Guilt choked him Eirikos' laughter from their youth, their oaths sworn under starlit skies, but Hecate's promise burned brighter, a path to justice for his murdered family. The war band reached the chamber, the portal's glow blinding. Eirikos roared Astaroth's name, his axes raised, but Mira stayed his hand. "He's one of us," she urged, her voice cutting through his rage. Leaf, stepping forward, his sword blazing, snarled, "He's a traitor." The ruins came alive, stone warriors rising from the walls, animated by the Heartstone's magic. The war band fought, blades clashing against enchanted stone, as Astaroth turned, his dagger drawn, eyes wild with fear and resolve. "Forgive me," he whispered, the shard flaring in his hand. Sigrun's absence haunted them, her visions a warning unheeded Mira and Eirikos, bound by love, standing over a broken world. The portal widened, a howl of wind and shadow pulling at their souls. Eirikos lunged for Astaroth, axes gleaming, but the skald raised the shard, its light erupting. The chamber shook, the underworld's gate tearing open, and shadows surged, dragging the warband toward a realm of fire and death. Astaroth's eyes met Eirikos, a plea unspoken, as the portal's maw swallowed them, the god's laughter echoing in the dark. The portal's maw spat the warband into a realm where Helheim's frost mingled with Hades' fire, a shadowed expanse of ash and bone that stretched beyond sight. Eirikos' Drustan landed hard, Stormcleaver and Aegisfang still gripped tight, his berserker's heart pounding against the suffocating air. Mira Lysandra rose beside him, Gorgona's light dim but unyielding, her eyes scanning the gloom for Astaroth Vidurson. The skald stood apart, the Heartstone shard pulsing in his hand, his face a mask of guilt and defiance. Leaf Nicandros staggered. To his feet, his sword's fire flickering in the underworld's chill, his gaze torn between Mira and the traitor who had led them here. The ground was littered with skulls, some Norse, some Greek, their empty sockets whispering of ancient wrongs. Rivers of black water sticks and jol entwined flowed through the cavern, their currents hissing with the voices of the dead. The war band, diminished and weary, formed a ragged circle, their weapons drawn against the shadows that stirred. Astaroth's betrayal hung heavy, his eyes avoiding Eirikos' Hecate's, mark a brand on his soul. The Heartstone shard flared, its light summoning shades warriors of old, their armor a blend of fur and bronze, demanding justice for forgotten betrayals. Hades and Hell emerged from the dark, their forms vast and terrible, their voices a chorus of frost and flame. Mira Lysandra, they intoned, their eyes piercing her soul, "Give us Eirikos' soul, and your clan shall rise from ruin." Mira's breath caught, Gorgona trembling in her grip, her love for Eirikos afire against the god's cold bargain. Eirikos stepped forward, his axes lowered, his voice steady. "Choose your people, Mira," he said, his eyes soft but resolute. "My soul for their lives, I pay it gladly." The war band stirred, their loyalty wavering, Lax's sword rising as if to claim Eirikos himself. Mira's heart tore, duty and love clashing like blades. "No," she whispered, stepping between Eirikos and the gods. "I won't trade one soul for another." The shades surged, their wails a storm, and the warband fought, their weapons carving through spectral flesh. Astaroth, clutching the shard, staggered under Hecate's command, her voice a lash. "Seal their doom, Skald, or yours is forfeit." But Eirikos' gaze, heavy with betrayed brotherhood, held him fast, his dagger wavering. The rivers rose, their waters biting like steel, testing the warband's resolve. Mira and Eirikos fought side by side, their blades a dance of defiance, but the shades were endless, their numbers swelling with each fallen warrior. Leif, driven by Ares' fading fire, cut through to Mira, his voice breaking. "Come back to me," he pleaded, his sword lowered, but her eyes remained on Eirikos, her choice a silent vow. The Heartstone shard pulsed, its light twisting the underworld's shadows into visions of a burning world. Astaroth raised the shard, its glow tearing at the veil between realms. "I did this for my kin," he cried, his voice cracking, but the gods' laughter drowned him. Hades and Hell loomed closer, their bargain a noose. Mira, her heart breaking, stepped toward them, Gorgona raised. "Take me instead," she said, her voice a blade. The gods paused, their eyes gleaming, and the rivers surged, claiming Eirikos in a torrent of shadow. Mira's scream echoed as he vanished, the underworld's grip tightening, and the warband stood frozen, their fates hanging on her doomed bargain. The underworld's rivers roared, their black waters of Styx and Joel, swallowing Eirikos Drustan, his axes, Stormcleaver and Ichisfang, glinting briefly before the shadows claimed him. Mira Lysandra's scream tore through the cavern Gorgona, falling from her hand as she lunged toward the torrent, her bargain with Hades and Hell, a chain around her heart. The war band stood frozen, their blades useless against the gods' will, the shades of fallen warriors circling like wolves. Leif Nicandros, his sword dimmed of Ares' fire, reached for Mira, his face a storm of grief and rage, but she pulled away, her eyes fixed on the river's dark depths. Astaroth Vidderson clutched the Heartstone shard, its pulse a mocking echo of his betrayal. Hecate's laughter silent, but her mark burning his soul. The cavern pulsed with the groans of the dead, its walls carved with Norse and Greek rites runes of passage beside sigils of mourning, a testament to the ancient dead who judged them now. The war band, battered and few, navigated the underworlds, twisting paths, their steps guided by Mira's resolve. "We find him," she said, her voice raw but unyielding, retrieving Gorgona, its light a faint beacon in the gloom. Persephone and Idun appeared, their forms shimmering like spring in a frost of Helheim and Hades' realm. "There is hope," Persephone whispered, her eyes soft with pity, "but the price is steep." Idun nodded, her golden apples gleaming. "Face your fears, and you may reclaim him." The rivers parted, revealing a path of bone and ash, lined with trials, mirrors of regret, shades of past sins, each step a test of the war band's will. Mira led, her love for Eirikos a fire that burned through the cold, but her heart trembled with the weight of her bargain. The first trial was a mirror of memory. Mira saw her clans fall, her father's hammer broken, her choice to love Eirikos the spark of their ruin. She faltered, but Leif's hand steadied her, his voice low. "You are not alone," he said, his honor clashing with his pain. Eirikos faced his own shade, his father, unavenged, accusing him of forsaking duty for love. His axes trembled, but he pressed on, his bond with Mira stronger than his oath. Astaroth saw his murdered kin, their eyes pleading, Hecate's voice urging him to abandon his brothers, but he gripped the shard, its light wavering. The rivers surged, their waters whispering of betrayal and loss. The war band fought shades of their past comrades slain, oaths broken, each blow a confession of their fears. Mira and Eirikos, reunited in a chamber of bone, faced their deepest regret, their love, a flame that could save or doom the world. "I'd choose you again," Eirikos said, his hand finding hers, their touch a defiance of the gods. But the rivers roared, and a tide of shadow rose, claiming Eirikos once more. His axes fell, his form dissolving into the dark, and Mira's cry echoed as the underworld's heart closed around him, leaving her alone with the warband, their path now a descent into despair. Mira Lysandra emerged from the underworld's depths, her heart a wound where Eirikos Drustan's absence bled. Gorgona hung heavy in her hand, its light dimmed, as if Athena mourned with her. The war band followed, their faces gaunt, the rivers of Styx and Jal still whispering in their ears. The cursed isle they returned to was a ruin, its shores scarred by the gods' wrath, the air thick with the ash of fallen warriors. Leif Nicandros walked beside Mira, his sword no longer blazing. With Ares' fire, his eyes heavy with unspoken grief. Astaroth Vidderson trailed behind, the heartstone shard hidden in his cloak. Hecate's mark a silent curse, his betrayal a shadow he could not outrun. The sky churned, Odin's ravens and Hera's peacocks circling as the gods' wager tightened. Its grip, Hera's voice slithered into Mira's mind, cold and seductive. "Deliver Eirikos' heart, and your clan will rise anew." The words stung, her bargain with Hades and Hell, already a chain she had offered herself. Yet Eirikos was lost. The war band gathered on the beach, their numbers dwindled to a handful, their loyalty frayed by loss and Astaroth's treachery. Mira stood tall, her voice steady despite her pain. "We end this war," she said, her eyes scanning the horizon, as if Eirikos might still emerge from the sea. The heartstone's shards, scattered in the sand, pulsed faintly, their light weaving. Visions of a world reborn or burned. Mira knelt, gathering one, its glow warm in her palm. It showed her leading her clan to glory, but alone, Eirikos' axes broken. She shuddered, torn between vengeance for her people and forgiveness for the Ka. Man she loved. The war band watched, their breaths held. As the gods' war spilled into the mortal realm, lightning cracked, the sea boiled, and spectral warriors rose from the waves. Their armor a blend of Norse and Greek, their eyes hollow with divine fury. Leif stepped forward, his voice low. "Let me fight for you, Mira," he said, his honor a fragile shield against his pain. She shook her head, her gaze distant. "This is my burden," she replied, the shard's light flaring in her hand. Astaroth, his guilt a storm, clutched his own shard, Hecate's whisper urging him to flee, but the warband's eyes pinned him. "I led them to us," he confessed, his voice breaking, falling to his knees. The warband drew weapons, but Mira raised a hand. "We need him," she said, her forgiveness a blade that cut both ways. The isle trembled, the gods' avatars. Descending Odin's spear, clashing with Hera's scepter, their power tearing the sky. Mira raised the heartstone shard, its light a beacon, and called out, her voice ringing over the chaos. "Face me, gods. Parley, or I shatter this." The war band gasped, life's sword wavering, Astaroth's eyes wide with fear. The sea stilled. The spectral warriors froze, and the gods' laughter fell silent. A shadow loomed, Odin and Hera taking form on the shore, their eyes gleaming with malice and intrigue. The heartstone pulsed, and the isle held its breath. Mira's defiance, a spark that could ignite or end their saga. The cursed isle quaked as Mira Lysandra stood defiant, the heartstone shard blazing in her hand, its light a challenge to the gods. The sea stilled, waves frozen mid-crest, as Odin and Hera took form on the bone-strewn shore, their presence a weight that crushed the air. Odin, one-eyed and cloaked in shadow, gripped a spear that hummed with the promise of death. Hera, regal and fierce, her eyes gleaming like polished bronze, held a scepter that sparked with divine fire. The war band, ragged and weary, stood behind. Mira, their weapons drawn but trembling under the god's gaze. Leif Nicandros tightened his grip on his sword, its fire gone, his heart torn between loyalty to Mira and his clan's honor. Astaroth Vidarson, the heartstone shard hidden in his cloak, knelt, Hecate's mark burning, his confession still raw in the air. Mira's voice cut through the silence, sharp as Gorgona's edge. End your war, or this shard breaks. The heartstone pulsed, its light weaving visions of shattered worlds and reborn hopes. Odin's laugh was a raven's croak, Hera's a peacock's cry, their wager now a noose around the mortal's fates. Bold words, shield maiden, Odin said, his eye piercing her soul. But only one lover may live to see the dawn. Hera nodded, her scepter flaring. Choose, Mira Lysandra Eirikos' heart or your clan's salvation. The war band stirred, their breaths held, as the gods' demand echoed the trials of old Norse things, where blood sealed fates. Leif stepped forward, his voice steady, despite his pain. Mira, let me stand for you, he said, his eyes pleading for a peace he could not claim. She shook her head. Gorgona raised, her love for Eirikos, a fire that burned through doubt. This is my fight, she said, her gaze locked on the gods. The heartstone shard flared, revealing their true faces. Odin's hunger for war, Hera's thirst for control. The isle groaned, its cliffs cracking, and spectral warriors rose from the sand, their armor a blend of Norse and Greek, their eyes demanding sacrifice. Astaroth, his guilt a storm, clutched his shard, Hecate's whisper urging him to flee, to betray once more. But Mira's defiance stirred him, her forgiveness a chain he could not break. I'll fight with you, he murmured, rising, his dagger drawn. The war band rallied, their loyalty rekindled, though their numbers were few. The gods' avatars loomed larger, their power shaking the earth, and the heartstone's light pulsed faster, its visions showing a cliff where two warriors clashed, one doomed to fall. Mira stepped toward Odin and Hera, the shard raised high. No more games, she said, her voice a Saga's cadence. You parley, or we all burn. The gods' eyes narrowed, their laughter fading, and the air crackled with their wrath. The isle trembled, the sea roaring anew, and a cliff rose. From the shore, its peak jagged against the storm. Odin's spear pointed to it, Hera's scepter flaring. A final trial, they declared. One lover lives, one dies. Leif's sword rose, his eyes on Mira, while Astaroth's hand shook, the shard's light calling him to the cliff. The warband braced, and Mira's heart pounded. The gods demand a blade at her throat, as the isle prepared to witness their doom. The cliff rose stark against the cursed Ael's roiling sky, its jagged peak a stage for the gods' final trial. Mira Lysandra stood at its base, Gorgona gripped tight, the heartstone shard pulsing in her other hand, its light a defiant flame. Against the storm, Eirikos Drustan, summoned from the underworld's grasp by the god's whim, faced Nicandros atop the cliff, their weapons gleaming storm cleaver and a chisfang against a sword reborn with Ares' fire. The war band circled below, their breaths held, their blades drawn but useless against the divine decree. One lover must die. Astaroth Vidurson, his own heartstone shard a burning weight, stood among them, Hecate's mark searing his soul, his dagger trembling with the choice between redemption and betrayal. Odin and Hera loomed in the sky, their avatars vast, their spear and scepter clashing in a storm that shook the isle. Every blow above echoed below, thunder mirroring Eirikos and life's strikes. Eirikos fought with berserker fury, his axes a whirlwind, each swing a vow to Mira. Life countered with deadly precision, his sword a blazing arc, driven by Ares' wrath, and a heart still aching for Mira's love. For honor, Leif roared, his blade grazing Eirikos' chest, blood welling like the isle's cursed rivers. Eirikos staggered but struck back, each fang splintering Leif's shield. For her, he bellowed, his eyes locked on Mira below. Mira's heart tore, her love for Eirikos afire against the god's cruel game. She climbed the cliff, Gorgona flashing, her voice a desperate cry. Stop! The war band stirred, their loyalty split. Some shouted for Eirikos, others for Leif's honor. Astaroth's hand tightened on his dagger, Hecate's whisper urging him to strike, to end the duel and claim his vengeance. But Mira's courage held him, her forgiveness a chain he could not break. The heartstone shards flared, their light weaving visions of a world in flames, the lover's blood staining the sea. The gods' laughter roared, their avatars descending closer, their power cracking the cliff. Eirikos and Leif's duel intensified, each wound mirrored in the sky, blood dripping, clouds bleeding red. Mira reached the peak, Gorgona raised, and threw herself between them, her blade blocking life's strike. No more, she screamed, her voice shaking the heavens. The heartstone shard in her hand shattered, its fragments exploding in a cosmic storm, the light blinding, the wind howling. The cliff trembled, rocks falling into the churning sea, and the gods' avatars recoiled, their wager disrupted by her act of love. Eirikos and Leif froze, their weapons lowered, their eyes on Mira. The war band below gasped, Astaroth dropping his dagger, Hecate's voice silenced by the storm's roar. The isle groaned, its edges crumbling, the sea rising to claim it. The heartstone's shards pulsed one final time, their light tearing the sky, and the gods' avatars vanished, their laughter replaced by silence. Mira, Eirikos, and Leif stood amidst the chaos, the cliff cracking beneath them as the isle began to sink, the storm a testament to their defiance, their fates now bound to the gods' reckoning. The isle shattered, its cliffs collapsing into the churning sea as the cosmic storm unleashed by the Heartstone's destruction roared across the archipelago. Mira Lysandra stood on the crumbling cliff, Gorgona still raised, her act of love a spark that defied the gods. Eirikos Drustan and Leif Nicandros flanked her, their weapons lowered, blood dripping from their wounds, their eyes wide with the weight of her sacrifice. The war band below clung to the quaking shore, their faces etched with awe and dread as the boundaries between worlds frayed. Astaroth Vidurson, his dagger fallen, stared at the chaos. Hecate's mark silent, but his guilt a relentless tide. Odin and Hera descended, their avatars no longer shadows in the sky, but towering figures of wrath and fire, their spear and scepter clashing with a force that split the earth. The sea boiled, leviathans rising from its depths, summoned by Poseidon, and Jormungandr's lingering malice. Spectral warriors, Norse and Greek, surged from the waves, their armor gleaming as they fought alongside the gods' avatars, their blades a chorus of ancient grudges. The war band rallied, their few remaining warriors forming a desperate shield wall, their axes and spears striking at shades that would not die. Mira's voice rang out, a saga's cadence over the storm. This ends now. She cried, the heartstones, shattered fragments glowing at her feet, their light a beacon of defiance. Eirikos gripped her hand, his axes ready, his love for her a fire that burned through the gods' wrath. Leif, his sword heavy, stepped beside them, his honor torn but, his heart choosing Mira's cause. For peace, he murmured, a vow to himself as much as to her. The war band fought, their blades carving through spectral foes, but the gods' power was a tide none could stem. Astaroth, his resolve reborn, drew a hidden shard from his cloak, its light flaring as he joined the fray, his dagger striking. True, forgive me, he whispered, fighting alongside Eirikos, seeking redemption in blood. The isle sank faster, its shores swallowed, the sea claiming the petrified warriors' remains. The gods' avatars clashed, their blows tearing reality mountains crumbled. The sky bled, and the war band faltered, their numbers dwindling to a mere handful. Mira raised the Heartstone's fragments, their light blinding, and faced Odin. And Hera, take my life, she said, her voice steady, but spare his soul. The gods paused, their eyes narrowing, the storm stilling for a heartbeat. Eirikos roared, no. His axes raised, but Mira's gaze held him, her love a silent vow. Leif stepped forward, his sword offered, take mine instead, his voice breaking, a final act of honor. The war band watched, their breaths held, as the gods' avatars loomed, their wager trembling on the edge of resolution. The Heartstone's light surged, a storm of its own, and the isle groaned its final breath, sinking beneath the waves. The gods' avatars flickered, their power wavering, as Mira's bargain hung in the air, a life for a soul, a love that could end or save the world. The sea roared, claiming the last of the war band's ground, and the survivors clung to wreckage, their fates bound to Mira's choice, as the gods' reckoning shook the heavens. The storm of divine wrath tore across the archipelago, with the fury of all 9 worlds unleashed. Odin's ravens wheeled screaming through air, thick with Zeus's lightning, while Hera's peacocks shrieked defiance at Freya's cats. The very stones beneath Mira's feet cracked and bled as the gods' avatars clashed above, their weapons rending reality itself. From the sinking palace of coral and bone where she knelt, Mira felt the Heartstone's fragments burning in her palms like molten silver. Each shard pulsed with the memory of love and loss, Sigrun's sacrifice, Astaroth's torment, the endless cycle of blood that had brought them to this moment. The salt spray mixed with her tears as she gazed upon Eirikos, his spirit form wavering between the mortal realm and whatever lay beyond. The bargain is made, Hades intoned, his voice like grinding millstones. the boy's soul for the girl's flesh. Such has been the way since gods first walked among mortals. His skeletal hand reached toward Eirikos, shadows writhing around ghostly fingers. But Hel stepped forward, ice crystals trailing from her half-dead features. The northern dead are mine by ancient right. This one bears Odin's mark. He belongs in my halls, not yours, oath brother. Her words carried the bite of winter winds, and where her breath touched the air, frost flowers bloomed and died. Above them, the divine battle raged with cosmic fury. Thor's hammer rang against Ares' shield, each blow echoing like the world tree's roots splitting. Athena's spear met Tyr's sword in showers of starfire, while Poseidon and Jormungandr writhed together in a dance of destruction that turned the sea to boiling foam. Enough! Mira's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. She rose, the heartstone fragments lifting from her palms to orbit around her like fallen stars. I offer more than flesh. I offer the one thing you gods have never possessed. The avatars paused in their warfare. Even mighty Odin turned his single eye upon her, while Hera's proud features showed surprise beneath her golden diadem. Speak, mortal, Odin rumbled. What could you possess that we, who shaped the very roots of Yggdrasil, might desire? Mira stepped forward, and where her bare feet touched the blood-soaked stones, white flowers bloomed. I offer you true sacrifice not the death you demand, but the one thing that makes the gods envious of mortals. I offer you love freely given, with no hope of return. Eirikos reached for her with hands made of moonlight and memory. Mira, no, your life is worth more than what? She smiled, and in that smile lay all the warmth of summer meadows, all the fierce joy of shield walls, all the quiet tenderness of lovers' whispers. And the chance to break this cycle? To free our people from your eternal war? She turned to face the assembled gods, her chin raised in defiance. I choose love over fear, hope over despair, sacrifice over survival. Take my spirit to dwell among you, but let our love become the bridge between your warring realms. The heartstone fragments blazed like newborn suns, and from their light, new visions sprang forth. The gods saw themselves not as masters, but as prisoners of their own eternal conflicts, bound by oaths and pride and ancient grudges. They saw the beauty that mortals created in their brief lives, songs and stories, children and crops. The simple miracle of choosing to hope, despite knowing that death would claim them all. Hera stepped forward, and for the first time in eons, tears glittered on the Queen of Heaven's cheeks. You would give up your mortal life, knowing that you might fade to nothing in our halls? I would give up anything, Mira replied, if it means that others might live free of this war. Odin's ravens settled upon his shoulders, whispering secrets in the All-Father's ears. Slowly, the one-eyed god nodded. You offer us wisdom, child of the North. Perhaps even we might learn from mortals what it means to choose love over victory. The divine avatars began to shimmer and fade, their forms becoming translucent as morning mist. Zeus's lightning gentled to golden sunbeams, while Thor's thunder softened to distant music. The gods were withdrawing, returning to their halls and high seats, their ancient wager transformed into something greater, a lesson in the power of sacrifice. But as the light faded from the crumbling archipelago, Mira felt Eirikos' spirit hand close around hers. If you go to dwell among the gods, he whispered, and I choose to follow. Let us be spirits together, walking between the worlds, guardians of love against the darkness of endless war. Together, they stepped into the light of the Heartstone's final flare, their mortal forms dissolving like sea foam, their spirits intertwining like golden threads on the cosmic loom. The surviving members of their war-band life standing bloodied, but proud, Astaroth weeping for his betrayals. The scattered remnants of both clans watched as their loves became legend, their sacrifice becoming a new star in the northern sky. The Isles of Scotia sank beneath the waves with a sound like distant singing, taking with them the bones of ancient wars and a promise of new beginnings. The survivors clung to whatever flotsam they could find, their small boats riding the swells toward distant shores where new lives awaited. 7 years had passed since the god storm claimed the Isles of Scotia, and the survivors' children barely remembered the sound of divine thunder. The settlement of New Skolder nestled in a green valley beside a Scottish loch, its longhouses, and workshops thriving under gray northern skies. Smoke rose from forge fires and hearthstones, while children played war games with wooden swords, and their mothers sang old songs while they worked their looms. Leif Nicandros, now called Leif the Peacebearer, stood at the settlement's highest point, watching the sun set over waters that had never known the god's wrath. Gray threaded his golden beard, and his sword arm bore the scars of that final battle. But his eyes held the peace of a man who had found his purpose. At his side stood Astrid, daughter of a local chieftain, her hand resting gently on the swell of her belly. "Tell me again about the lovers," she murmured, her voice carrying the soft accent of the island-born Scots. "Tell me how they saved us all." Leif's weathered features softened as he began the tale he had told 100 times before, his words carrying the rhythm and power that Astaroth had once commanded. For the Skald's final gift, before madness claimed him entirely, had been to teach life the sacred art of storytelling, ensuring that no deed would be forgotten, no sacrifice lost to time's hunger. In the days when gods walked freely among mortals, Leif began, when the northern seas boiled with divine fury and the very stones bled with ancient rage, there sailed a ship called Skolder's Fury. Upon her deck stood warriors whose loves burned, brighter than funeral pyres, whose hearts proved stronger than the chains of fate itself. As his voice rose and fell like ocean swells, others gathered to listen. Fishermen mending nets, warriors sharpening blades, children wide-eyed with wonder, all drawn by the eternal magic of a story well told. They had heard this saga countless times, yet each telling revealed new depths, new meanings hidden in the spaces between words. Mira Lysandra, blessed of Athena, whose blades sang with righteous fury. Eirikos Drustan, berserker born, whose axes carved legends in the shield wall. Sigrun Callista, seer and archer, whose love knew no bounds. Astaroth Vidarson, whose words could charm the very stones, yet whose greatest tale was written in his own redemption. In the crowd, a young woman named Thora felt her unborn child stir at the familiar names. She touched the bone pendant. At her throat a fragment of the original Heartstone, given to her by the settlement's wise woman, and gasped as visions flashed behind her eyes. Two figures walking between worlds, their love lighting the darkness, their sacrifice echoing through generations yet unborn. For the god's withdrawal had not been an ending, but a transformation. The old power still moved in the world, but subtly now, working through human hearts rather than divine commands. Love and loyalty, courage and sacrifice, these forces needed. No altar, no temple, no priest to speak their truth. They lived in every choice to stand for another, every decision to hope despite despair, every moment when mortals chose to love despite knowing that all things must pass. As Leif's tale reached its climax, the lovers' ascension, the gods' retreat, the dawn of a new age, a child's voice piped up from the crowd. But what happened to Mira and Eirikos? Do they still watch over us? The storyteller smiled, his eyes twinkling with ancient knowledge. Look to the northern lights on winter nights, little one. See how they dance across the sky in ribbons of green and gold? The wise women say, those are the spirits of the God-touched lovers, forever walking the boundary between earth and heaven, guardians of all who choose love over hate, hope over fear. A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the gathering, that deep contentment that comes when a story finds its perfect ending. Yet as the crowd began to disperse, returning to their evening tasks and quiet conversations, Thora remained behind. Her hand pressed against her swelling belly, and she felt the child within her pulse like a second heartbeat. The wise woman, ancient Ragnhild who remembered the old days, shuffled over with her staff of carved whalebone. Her milk-white eyes found Thora's with uncanny precision, and her voice carried the whisper of distant shores. The child quickens at the tale's telling. That is a sign, daughter. The blood of heroes runs in new veins. What does it mean? Thora whispered, though in her heart she already knew. The cycle turns, as it always has, as it always must. Ragnhild's gnarled fingers traced a blessing in the air. The gods may slumber, but their gifts remain. Love and loss, courage and sacrifice. These truths write themselves anew in every generation. She leaned closer, her breath smelling of herbs and deep magic. Your child will carry the mark, as others before, as others yet to come. When the world grows dark again, when the old hungers stir, heroes will rise. It is the way of things. As if summoned by her words, the northern lights began their nightly dance, sheets of green and gold rippling across the star-drunk sky. The gathered people paused in their evening tasks to watch, and for a moment, the boundary between legend and reality grew thin. Some swore they saw shapes in the light, a woman with a glowing sword, a man with axes that caught starfire, lovers walking hand in hand through the halls of eternity. Thora felt her unborn child move again, and she knew with the certainty that only mothers possessed that her baby would be born, marked by destiny. Not cursed, but blessed, chosen to carry forward the flame that Mira and Eirikos had lit with their sacrifice. The blood tide had receded, but its legacy flowed on through mortal veins, ensuring that when darkness rose again, love would stand ready to meet it. In her cottage beside the loch, the wise woman Ragnhild opened an ancient chest and withdrew a scroll of precious vellum. By the light of a single candle, she began to write in runes older than kingdoms. In the year when the gods withdrew and mortals claimed their freedom, a child was born who bore the mark of the Heartstone. Let this be remembered. The war is not ended, only begun. When the blood of lovers stains the sea again, when the old powers wake from their slumber, the cycle will turn once more. Heroes will rise, love will be tested, and the world will hang in the balance between light and shadow. This is the way of things. This is the promise written in star and storm, in blood and bone, in the eternal dance between mortal will and divine power. The saga continues, generation unto generation, world without end. She set down her quill and sealed the scroll with wax marked by an ancient signet. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the lock, wolves howled their tribute to the moon, and the wind carried whispers of stories yet to be told, of loves yet to be tested, of heroes yet to be born. The dawn of legends had begun.